Why is gold so expensive? Over the past 20 years, the gold market has continuously broken records and reached price levels that have surprised even experts. Currently, the price of gold has risen to $4,100 per ounce, with peaks reaching $4,200 per ounce. Interestingly, this is happening at a time when the world is experiencing more turmoil than ever before. Prolonged inflation, conflicts erupting in various regions, and increasing tensions between the US and China, particularly after the G7 group seized Russia's reserve assets. Emerging countries have begun to worry that holding reserves in US dollars or US bonds is no longer absolutely safe. As a result, they are rushing to buy gold to protect themselves against the risk of their assets being frozen at any moment. And that leads to the big questions that anyone who is hoarding, investing in gold, or accumulating other assets wants to understand. Why has gold become such an important safe haven asset? Why are central banks rushing to buy gold, leading many analysts to no longer dismiss the forecast that gold could reach $10,000 an ounce? And as China accumulates gold at an unprecedented rate, will the United States consider imposing taxes or implementing measures to control the amount of gold that China holds? So, do you think gold will continue to rise in price? Why is it so expensive? Have you ever wondered why a metal that comes from explosions in space has become something that all of humanity considers the foundation of wealth for thousands of years? When we talk about gold, the first thing that always comes to my mind is its origin, which comes from the catastrophic collisions between neutron stars in the universe, and then through meteorite fragments that fell to this planet billions of years ago. This makes gold extremely rare, durable, rust-resistant, and particularly possessing a color that no other metal has. Gold became one of the first materials humans used as a symbol of power and value, because it is beautiful, eternal, easy to thin out, easy to bend, and easy to divide. Over time, gold became the first form of currency for humanity because it is rare, durable, easily transportable, and its value exists due to the collective trust of society. No other asset meets all these criteria simultaneously. Whenever instability occurs, from inflation and financial crisis to political risks, people choose gold as a safe haven because, deep down, humanity has believed in gold for tens of thousands of years, and that belief has never faded. The process of mining and producing gold. There are many reasons to explain why gold is so expensive, but if we have to start with the most important one, it is the process of mining and producing gold. Few people know that to obtain just 1 ounce of gold, we must process about 30 to 40 tons of rock and soil, and within that entire volume, the gold content is only between 1 to 5 grams per ton. Not only that, but the costs of digging tunnels, operating machinery, flotation, then using cyanide to separate the gold, and finally refining it to achieve high purity. All these steps consume enormous resources. And year by year, those costs increase because the easily accessible gold mines have long been depleted. The remaining mines are deeper, farther away, and poorer in ore, which means it costs more to extract the same amount of gold. The risks in this industry are not small. Mining accidents, cave-ins, and environmental pollution are all constant threats. Energy costs are also a significant burden, accounting for 25 to 40% of total production costs. Therefore, gold is expensive simply because producing it requires a great deal of sacrifice from the world. Costs, risk, technology, macroeconomic impact. The second reason explaining why gold is so expensive lies in the enormous costs and risks involved in the mining and production process. Companies must spend between $200 to $500 million just to open a commercial gold mine, and that is just the initial cost, as the payback period for such a project can extend from 10 to 15 years, meaning that any market fluctuations can destabilize the business. When inflation rises, interest rates fluctuate, and the dollar weakens, the capital costs for mining projects immediately increase. This causes gold prices in the international market to react very strongly. Therefore, each time the global economy experiences turbulence, gold prices tend to rise, not only due to the demand for safe havens, but also because the mining costs themselves escalate. Looking at the current phase, I see that gold is moving very similarly to 2006, a time when gold prices surged and exceeded traditional valuation models. However, there is a much more important factor: geopolitical volatility. As countries begin to worry that reserve assets could be frozen, similar to what happened with Russia, gold becomes the only asset that is almost impossible to seize or freeze. Therefore, in a world full of instability, gold is not just a precious metal, it is the financial shield that both nations and investors want to hold. Rarity, supply, market. One truly surprising thing that many people do not consider is that the total amount of gold that humanity has mined throughout history is actually much smaller than the demand the world consumes each day. When you hear that number, you will immediately understand why gold is precious. However, what is more concerning is that the rate of new gold extraction is clearly slowing down. From 2018 to 2024, global gold production has continuously decreased, indicating that easily accessible sources are running out, and finding new mines is becoming increasingly difficult. However, at the same time, the demand for gold reserves surged, especially in emerging economies. This stemmed from an event that can be seen as a major turning point in the international financial system. When the G7 group seized Russia's reserve assets in 2022, many countries immediately realized that holding assets in US dollars or US bonds was no longer absolutely safe. They understood that in a world full of geopolitical risks, financial assets could be frozen by a political decision. Therefore, countries quickly accelerated their gold purchases as a self-protection measure. Gold possesses characteristics that no financial asset can match. It is a tangible material, independent of the banking system, not subject to the influence of any nation, and particularly nearly impossible to seize or freeze. Gold not only retains its value, but has also become one of the most important and expensive assets of our time. Global demand for gold, especially if you want to understand why gold prices have been continuously rising in recent years. Look at how countries around the world are quietly accumulating gold. When you observe China, India, Turkey, or Kazakhstan, they are buying gold at a record pace. And this is not a mere coincidence. It reflects a common concern among many nations during these turbulent times. Gold is a tangible asset that is not dependent on the international banking system, is not subject to the coordination of any government, and most importantly, cannot be frozen. For this reason, countries concerned about the safety of their foreign exchange reserves have begun to accumulate gold as a long-term defensive strategy. As global demand for gold surges, it naturally drives gold prices higher. Gold has become not only a safe haven asset, but also a shield protecting the economy of an entire nation. In your opinion, if the trend of gold accumulation by countries continues to rise, will this create a new gold rush worldwide? What do you think will happen next? Data evidence, real life examples. If you need the clearest evidence of gold's strength, look at how gold prices have surged over the past 2 decades. When we look back over the last 20 years, the price of gold has risen from $450 to over $4,200 per ounce. This is not a normal price increase, it is a global shift in how people and nations perceive the value of gold. Notably, this trend becomes even more pronounced in the period from 2024 to 2025 as gold continuously reaches new highs. There are many reasons behind this upward trend, most of which are related to the economic and geopolitical fluctuations that the world is facing. Inflation in the US has lasted longer than expected, causing both the public and investors to worry about the weakening value of the dollar over time. At the same time, there are forecasts that the Fed may have to cut interest rates even if inflation has not returned to target, which further increases the risk of the dollar continuing to weaken, making gold a more attractive option. Meanwhile, China has been continuously buying gold for over 18 months, creating significant pressure on global demand. And of course, conflicts around the world, from Ukraine to the Middle East, have heightened the demand for safe havens, something that no asset does better than gold. When you combine all these factors, you can see why gold is becoming a central asset in the current uncertain economic landscape. In your opinion, if global tensions continue to rise and the dollar weakens further, will gold reach a new peak in the near future? What price do you think is reasonable for an ounce of gold in the future? Summary conclusion. If we had to draw a core reason explaining why gold has always maintained its timeless value, it would be its special role during periods of global instability. When we look back at the entire history of gold's movement, one fact is very clear. Gold is expensive not only because it is rare, but because it possesses characteristics that almost no other asset has. Gold is a tangible material, cannot be counterfeited, is not under the control of any nation, and most importantly, cannot be confiscated or frozen like paper financial assets. This makes gold the ultimate refuge when everything else becomes unstable. Since Group G froze Russia's reserve assets, a significant lesson has been sent to the world that holding reserves in US dollars or US bonds is no longer absolutely safe. For emerging economies, gold has quickly become the most reliable financial shield, as only gold can exist outside the influence of international political decisions. In the context of a weakening dollar, high global inflation, increasing risks of asset seizures, and ongoing geopolitical crises, gold is emerging as the most important defensive option. As confidence in the financial system continues to waver, gold has become the top safe haven. This explains why gold prices may continue to rise sharply in the future, as individuals, businesses, and nations all seek to hold it as a form of ultimate insurance for their financial stability. In your opinion, with the current rapid price increase, can gold reach new highs and exceed the limits we once thought were set? Where do you predict the price of gold will go in the near future? If you find this video helpful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a comment on what topic you would like me to cover in the next video. See you next time.